Good evening. Today, I want to talk about how we can define the future and change the future using SDGs as the youth today. Our theme today is how we can change the future, but it isn't just the future, it is our future as the youth, especially as by 2030 and in our future generation and in the next few decades, we'll be the ones leading the society and we'll be the ones who will benefit and also have the most impact from what we'll be doing today. So we all know that there are 17 sustainable development goals. And I think we can all agree that we do not memorize every single one of them. So I think we can just divide it into three major categories. One is to create these goals create a more equal society, a society that makes sure that everyone is well fed, has equal access to health, and is equal in gender equality and other inequalities. The next is that the world is more sustainable. We aim to create a world where cities are more livable, where pollution is non existent, and where climate change is a thing of the past. And finally, the Sustainable Development Goals aims to create more opportunities, not just opportunities for work, but also create opportunities for developing countries to improve their society, their justice system, and their industry. As the youth today, we face all of these global goals, and at the same time, we are one of the most impacted groups based on this. So let's look quickly at some of the impacts that these have on the youth. So first is our effect on equality. So 178 million children are undernourished in the world. At the same time, almost half a billion people live in conflict zones, and 260 million of the youth live without education. Next, when we look into how sustainability has been affecting ourselves right now, in the next 15 years, as temperatures increase and we fail to tackle climate change, we could be looking at increased ecosystem collapse, agricultural failure, and climate-driven conflict. Already, there are some regions that are going into war over a lack of water, and at the same time, the destruction of some fertile land. So we could see this exacerbate in the next 15 years. And finally, as the world tries to go past the pandemic and the global population continues to rise, we face rising unemployment, the loss of a living wage, and slower economic growth, especially in developing countries. So we're creating a greater inequality between the poor and rich. And I feel like that these problems will occur if our SDGs are not tackled properly. So what do I believe can help us fight these SDGs? I believe that SDG 16 actually helps encompass all of this, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions, with a priority on creating stronger institutions. So, what is SDG 16? It is a promotion of peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, especially through the creation of effective and accountable institutions. So, what are the institutions that I am talking about? Here are just some example institutions. First, we have the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, which helps smaller countries, for example, the Philippines, combat China and like arbitrary rulings for, let's say, the South China Sea or Spratly Islands dispute. We also have the UNHRC or United Nations Human Rights Council, which help protects the rights of our refugees and migrants, and at the same time assures that no one is discriminated based on their gender and age. And of course, we have one of our greatest achievements, the United Nations, which over the past 70 years have helped us achieve SDGs and connect the world in ways that we have never been connected before. All of our problems climate change, poverty, and the loss of job opportunities cannot be solved by a single nation. It must be solved by an international consortium. And international organizations such as the United Nations is a way for us to help create and ensure a better society. But yes, these are just some examples I took. First, there's diplomacy in prevention of war in the United Nations in New York. The second is the creation of peacekeepers in order to protect society and human lives during conflict. And of course, here's an example of the Food and Agricultural Organization donating food to African nations in order to prevent starvation. So, what can we do as the youth in order to help support these organizations and institutions in order to help achieve our sustainable development goals? So, the first is greater interaction. So, I believe that the youth have a lot of great ideas, and being in a world in the 21st century, We have a lot of new technologies and we have a fresher view on the future. So what we should do is to create greater interaction between ourselves by joining conferences, workshops, and understanding and sharing our ideas towards greater solutions. So what is an example of this? An example of this is joining conferences like Model United Nations. So, for example, here in a conference that I was organizing, we could have a lot of students from around the country in the Philippines came together to discuss the issue of the politicization of the COVID-19 vaccine. So, while these solutions may not be implemented, these will really spark a seed of idea that possibly in the future we can use to help society. The second solution is greater representation by participating in national discussion and directing your skills towards the goals you wish to create. So, for example, if you are studying to become an engineer, you can use your voice and your expertise as an engineer to help bring greater representation to, let's say, renewable energy technologies. By raising your voice and making your dreams heard, you can help sway the government and strengthen the institutions to allow them to better change our sustainable development goals. So an example of this is, let's say, through protest, whether in person or online. So I know that some people have opinions about protests, and I agree. I agree that protests, some people might feel like it's a bit too violent, but I say that most protests are peaceful, and actually this can actually help societies change and make their voices heard by the government. So, for example, here in the Philippines, we have a lot of students protesting against the extrajudicial killings of the government, and this actually helped bring awareness of the international community and help bring accountability to our government officials. And finally, what we can do to advance our institutions and create better SDGs is becoming a greater generation. We see some of our SDGs are actually about inequalities, gender equality, reduced inequalities, inequalities in work. By having the right mindset as one generation, we can actually completely change our ideas and our values towards creating a better society. And at the same time, by being correctly educated and a generation that can let their voices be heard, we can help eliminate prejudice and create the change that our society truly needs. So together, I believe that we as the youth can help protect and strengthen our global institutions. And these global institutions can help improve the sustainable developmental goals that will overall improve our lives. So that's it for my presentation. And yes, thank you so much.
Since you've mentioned about the youth and how our generation can work towards achieving these goals, what about the older generations? Like, for sure, like we can't leave them behind. We can't leave them to thinking that um, to have their mindset still be the same. How do we influence the older generations or change the way they view things, just as how our generation nowadays are, or how we think nowadays?
Okay. Thank you. So I believe that the reason why older generations are very resistant to like what the younger generation is trying to tell them is because sometimes we ask too much from the older generations really quickly. What we want to do actually is to actually slowly introduce them to our ideas so that they'll be acclimated to it before instead of really pushing our ideas very quickly. And at the same time, I think we can begin educating or like informing the older generation, starting off with our families and the people around us. I think if every youth was able to like convince their parents, their grandparents, I think the world can be educated very quickly if we all did our part.
Uh, Actually, I wanted to ask, you have mentioned about SDG 16, the peace and CrossFit justice. So we generally witness here that youth generally don't talk much about peace. So my question is like how we can convince or influence to talk about peace more.
Um, I think that we can influence to talk about peace more is by raising awareness because many times a lot of youth are looking inside within their countries, the issues of their own countries, but a lot of people do not notice like the conflicts that we have in other regions until it reaches our borders. So I think what we can do is really increase the awareness, spread the word, use technology in order for the youth to understand what is happening around them. And at the same time, I think that we can use history or the past to like help educate the youth about the horrors of the past wars and how peace is really important in our society today.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, also.
Having a question for you, especially keeping United Nations in mind, as you said that youth, we can bring awareness and some change through international institutions. So the biggest international institution that we have is the United Nations. Can you suggest that how can we strengthen our United Nations, as you know that it's just a tool for the developed countries?
Okay. Yes, I somewhat agree with you. The United Nations has sometimes been ineffective due to the fact that developed countries like the US and Russia have a bigger say on how the process works. But I believe that our role, we comprise around 1 to 2 billion of the world's population, and like if we together rise up and help support this organization and like we support these ideals, will be. I think that that is our role to like support the organization and make sure that it manages to do what it has to do. So we have to support its policies, and at the same time, when we see that the United Nations is being abused, it is our job to speak out and force it to return back to its real goal, which is to ensure world peace and greater human rights.
Yeah, true that. But don't you think keeping this thing in mind that today's in the world of social media, a lot of like I can say 70% of our youth is distracted in making videos on TikToks and anything which is not so important but important for them. So how to tell them not to get distracted with all these coercive issues and focus on some real issues that we are actually facing today?
Okay. So
Because I'm shooting another question to you just because you brought the youth. So that's why it's a very interesting and vast topic.
I believe that it's hard to tell every single youth in the world to stop using TikTok or like to stop using social media. But I feel like all we need is just a few people, a few youth leaders to stand up and help inspire those around them. So, for example, Greta Thunberg. So she brought environmental activism into the minds of millions. So as we can see, it just takes one person to really begin a movement that not only starts in the classroom but actually reaches all the way to the United Nations. So we just need a few people to be able to stand up and inspire the others.
As you said, the international collaboration is never more important, but I think that there is a growing tendency toward ignoring multilateral cooperation among some countries. And my question is, how can we tackle this problem or such a unilateral politics?
To clarify, you're asking how can we tackle the problem of countries not cooperating? Like, oh,
Yes.
okay. Um, so I believe that the pandemic really showed how much international cooperation is important, especially in the spreading of vaccines and research with each other. So I think really what I actually studied a theory before, and it said that as long as most countries manage to stick together and follow a norm of cooperation, other countries would actually seek that legitimacy and actually join this group in order to just be a. It's like how you want to be a part of the friends, like bandwagoning basically. So what I want to say, I think this is like how one youth can inspire a lot of others. It's the same with like how one country can actually inspire the countries around its region also. So I think it would take a lot. I think as long as our countries or other countries manage to take the stand against something, or like expand, or like really what's the word, continue to cooperate, I think over time these countries who do not want to cooperate would soon be able to join us and create a real like global cooperation.
Powerful, Ralph. Thank you.
Thank you.